cheap solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles are changing the transport and energy sector as we know. I bring in guests to this podcast who will help you with their ideas to navigate this energy transition. By the way, this episode is also available as a video on our YouTube channel. Just search Energypreneurs. Thank you for joining. Hi, Jim. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing? I'm back in Manila. I understand you are also back in Manila, no?
I am in Manila, yeah. So
Wonderful.
Pretty hot today.
Okay. You are doing some amazing stuff where we are all solving problem with technology, but you are saying, hey, hang on, this technology needs to be driven by human being. Do we have enough? Maybe
Absolutely.
you can start then by introducing yourself.
Okay, hi, I'm Jim. I lead a company called Spark Horizon, which works out of the Philippines and Australia. Essentially, the Spark Horizon is solving two problems. So problem number one is in Australia and globally, especially in global north developed economies, there just aren't enough skilled people to deliver the clean energy transformation, whether that's from electrical engineers, grid connection engineers, through to people who actually wire the solar panels and pour the concrete. There's just a massive global skills shortage as we're going through this once in 100 years transition. There just aren't enough people. The flip side is my experience in the Philippines, which has 100,000 engineering graduates a year, has an incredible pool of young, talented, hardworking, English-speaking engineers and technical talent that is being horrendously underutilized. So of those 100,000 engineers, a huge proportion never do interesting work in engineering. They go work on production lines being factory technicians, or they work for construction companies. So you've got this huge demand for talent that's not being met in Australia and other developed economies. And you have this huge supply of talent that's being underutilized in the Philippines and likewise in many other developing economies that have huge pools of technical labor. The business matches the two together. So it's basically a talent organization, a lot of offshoring and remote hiring of folks in the Philippines, as well as helping move people from the Philippines to Australia to support renewable projects. So that's the business, that's the problem that we're trying to solve. And hopefully we can talk about more kind of global issues and how this problem with the Philippines and Australia fits more globally.
Wonderful. Give a bit more. How did you come up with that idea and what brings you to the Philippines?
So my background is been around the world a lot. Born in the UK, went to Papua New Guinea, grew up in Australia, went to London and then studied at Oxford, then to the Philippines and then back to Australia. So I've been working in and around the Philippines since 2012, have a pretty good understanding of what the Philippines has to offer, what some of the challenges are in working in the Philippines, but particularly just this amazing talent that is here. My kind of core belief as a company, as an individual, is that there's this incredible talent in the Philippines that is being underutilized, and that's the opportunity.
Wonderful, because the Philippines, I think, supplies a huge number of nurses globally, right? I think Australia has, my daughter was born, one of the nurses at the time, 30 plus years back, was a Philippine origin, but I've seen many times and all over the world. So you are trying to do same or similar for engineers.
Yeah, and I think this lies in both the opportunity and maybe the challenge. Developed economies tend to import labor that's maybe cheap but skilled. So the Philippines supplies a huge proportion of the world's nurses, a huge proportion of the world's carers in nursing home, but also a huge proportion of maritime skilled labor. And so what you tend to see is it sits at this sort of skilled but still not that well paid kind of part of the economy. There's clearly an opportunity to keep moving up the value chain and to be doing work that's more valuable, better paid. And I think the Philippines has the opportunity to do that. But one of the challenges is lots of people don't necessarily see the developing world as somewhere that can provide your next head of engineering or your next commercial solar sales manager. They tend to think they can provide a nurse or someone to repair an engine on the ship. So in terms of trying to unlock this opportunity, there's some significant sort of amounts of bias and perception and stereotypes that need to be unwound to address the opportunity.
I mean, that you picked up specific things because of energy transition. If we unpack that particular one, especially your solar engineer, transmission engineers. Those are traditional fields. So people have been already trained in those areas. But the new technology areas, the batteries and V2G that we discuss quite a bit on this platform, the vehicle to grid, and how electric vehicle will impact the society. These are brand new skills. So what's your view on that also? Developing those skills, because this is a very high-tech skills as well, no? Are you
I
doing
think,
anything upstream?
yeah, I think probably the best way to think about this is that there's a kind of pyramid of talent, and you've got the most experienced and the most knowledgeable at the top, and you've got this big pool. And the Philippines often addresses towards the bottom, but certainly not the bottom of the talent pool. Some of what you're talking about, the kind of cutting edge, how do you roll out an entirely new battery system? How do you design a technology or a set of standards and processes around V2G? This is right at the top end. But actually, this is where, again, the opportunity lies, is that some of Australia's best engineers are not doing the cool cutting edge stuff. They're putting batteries together for the 100th time, or they're designing a 400 megawatt solar system for the 400th time, or they're doing basic grid modeling. And not that there's much basic about grid modeling, but really what you need to be able to do is, if you can help bring international talent up into that middle of the pyramid, then it actually frees up the most experienced engineers, both in Australia and in the Philippines and globally, to do that really tough cutting edge work, because a lot of the time they're not. I speak to a lot of clients and they're paying above the odds to go talk to a GHD, an Ericon, or a Jacobs to get engineers with 10 years experience to do single line diagrams for a battery system. Like, the waste of the talent runs both ways. You've got people in the Philippines not utilizing their skills, but you've also got people at the top of the pyramid not utilizing their skills because we just don't have enough people doing the work.
So what you are suggesting, let me understand. So people in the pyramid setting, say in Australia, who are designing the same battery design more and more because they don't have anyone else to pick up their role, because they can move up the ladder.
Yeah.
And then you are saying, I can, or my company is providing more experienced people, or maybe more skilled, still at the base of the pyramid, but that will free up themselves to move up. And at the same time, those who are sitting at the lower side of the pyramid in the developed world can move up. So overall, the pyramid gets filled up optimally, and that helps everybody, south, north, and globally. Is that what you were saying?
Absolutely. And I think it was the Secretary General of the UN quoted the movie and said, what we need to do is everything, everywhere, all at once. And that really speaks to me. We have a massive talent shortage, and what we need to do is bring everybody up, I guess, the talent ladder, so that every single person who's working on these problems globally is doing more complex work, is learning faster, is getting an opportunity to do more challenging problems. That's how we accelerate the transition. And I think you've got an interest in AI. So let's put a pin in that and talk about how the role that AI plays in that kind of talent ladder maybe later on. I do want to talk to maybe some of the challenges that underlies this, because it sounds like this is easy, and it's certainly not an easy problem to solve. It's actually, there's lots of tough problems to solve. So for people from a different country to work with someone in Australia or the UK, there's actually often cultural barriers to how you work. And so you've got to, as well as different standards. So to move someone from the Philippines or anywhere else to Australia, they need to learn the new standards. They need to learn new ways of working. They might need to learn Australian business English. They need to learn how engineers solve problems and communicate differently in Australia or the UK or America to the Philippines or Indonesia or Singapore. You have to overcome things like bias. One of the biggest issues that you see is that there's just outright discrimination and bias in the industry, which is holding back the utilization. So one of the most dependable indicators of this and most dependable sort of social studies results is what's called CV studies. So if you send off 100 identical CVs, people in Australia, UK, America, and on one of them, it says the name is Mohammed, and the other one, it says the name is John. John will get a call back and Mohammed won't. This works for social economic. If you make someone seem richer, it works for gender, it works for universities and background. So what we see is we've got an industry in Australia and globally that's going, we don't have enough talent, at the same time as it's ignoring the talent that is available, or it's underpaying or underhiring or underutilizing the talent that's available. So what we have here is not only have we got this big technology challenge and it's big people challenge, but we actually have some real kind of issues around attitudes and bias and social beliefs that we need to address. So none of the things I'm trying to do are easy, but they're just very important.
I thought that was 40 years ago, but I thought that has changed significantly in Australia, no?
It's changed. It's changed and it's changing, but we're talking from a pretty low base. 40 years ago, we were just out of having our First Nations people being able to vote and not too far away from a white Australia policy. So getting better than 40 years ago is a low bar.
It must have been a long time back because I've been Australian almost 40 years now. So
I think the Constitution was changed in 75, something like that.
yeah. So it's 50 almost.
Yeah. Like I said, not too long ago. And what you do see it. So if you walk into any technical construction renewables company in Australia, or you look at them on LinkedIn, which I do all the time, you see a lot of, at the executive level, very white male. At the more junior level, you have lots of international folks who maybe came to Australia as international students. But what you don't have is that kind of transition in. And at every single level, often those folks are overqualified compared to their peers or are underhired. So you have master's students, engineering master's students doing basic project management or customer service jobs or admin jobs all through Australia. And Engineers Australia has done a lot of work on this. For those who are listening outside of Australia, Engineers Australia is the kind of qualification body which looks at chartered engineers in Australia and has produced masses of data that shows that engineers who are born overseas in Australia are often not working in engineering and why that is. And again, lots of complex problems around qualifications and knowledge and networks and things like that. So again, none of these are easy to solve, but there's absolutely lots of both outright and hard and soft barriers to engineers from developing economies working in Australia.
Okay, that's going to be a long debate. So So the problem that you are trying to solve, that is a serious problem, especially if you think about moving upstream and how the universities work and develop those skills. And then also the fairness. Some people say, I just finished a nuclear engineering degree, and now they're saying that we are not going to build nuclear or whatever. I'm not a big fan of nuclear. Maybe the bad example, but like a traditional transmission distribution engineering, if that's all somebody learns today and comes to the world of electrical engineering, it's changed. It's changed completely. I'm saying the Latrobe Valley of Victoria, where I first as a junior engineer, someone showed me at Hazelwood saying, Mate, this is what we do. Dig out coal, burn it, send it, and that's it. But that world has changed. Don't tell that a fresh engineer today working for a state electricity commission or any of the power companies. The world is changed. You have to think about solar, you have to think about battery. Now you have to think about even cars, you have to think about people selling. So it's a very different world. There's a lot more commercial activities has come in than pure engineering. You know what I mean?
Yes and no. I think sometimes it's very easy to focus on the cool stuff and the cutting edge stuff and lose maybe sight of the bigger, what's actually still happening. The majority of Australia's energy is still fossil fuel generated. And even integrating renewables and vehicle to grid and EVs and wind and pumped hydro, whilst some of those challenges are new and cutting edge, a huge proportion of we just need to build a bunch more wires. We need to upgrade a bunch of old transformers. We need to upgrade the distribution network. We need to build hundreds of kilometers of transmission lines as fast as possible. We need to plug in millions and millions of solar panels and wire them to the distribution. And so a lot of it's the same stuff. We don't have enough of anybody to do that.
And I know, but what I meant to say that because I'm quite a number of years I spent on system planning at the State Electricity Commission of Victoria. Those days, system modeling and everything was very simple. Thinking was very binary. Build, we supply, everything is plug and play. But now the variables have increased. I have 2 engineering degrees, so I'm coming from that sort of background saying that the syllabus, if you like, an undergraduate electrical engineering has not dramatically changed, especially in developing Asia, where you're saying you'll take the talent pool. So maybe there needs to be some work done also working with the education and others saying, I know people are a lot of self-educated, but the fundamental engineering 101 scope has changed. So that's what I meant.
No, I think this is interesting. And again, it comes back to everything everywhere all at once. There's shortages at the really complex what's changed planning thing, and there's some big issues there. My master's degree is Masters of Energy at University of Melbourne, and it's deliberately one of these multi kind of disciplinary degrees that looks at management and economics and energy for exactly this reason, is that you need a lot more kind of multidisciplinary skills than previously did. And that's what the developers are massively looking for, people who can understand legal and social and the community side and the technical side. So this kind of like multi-skilled requirement for senior leaders and planners and designers is absolutely there for sure.
So now the elephant in the room in all of those discussions is AI and robotics, right? So does that change, or does it change it at all?
Okay. So my view on AI is what we should really be thinking about is its ability to support people rather than replace people, number one, and particularly in helping people learn rapidly. And so what I mean by that is it's never going to make you an expert, but it can make you reasonable in a field quite quickly. And so what you might see is that actually it's the incredibly flattening of the global talent pool. So for example, if I was 10 years ago, actually 3 years ago, 4 years ago, pre-AI, 4 years ago, if I was an electrical engineer coming to Australia and wanting to operate in Australia, I would need to learn standards, how the different grids work, how the market works, how the different codes work, all of these kind of things. And that's a multi-year project with an experienced person mentoring me. So there's a massive barrier to move from being a senior electrical engineer in the Philippines and then working in Australia. Those barriers have massively shrunk. They still exist because you can come in and say, this is the standard I used in the Philippines. I'm working on this project. What do I need to think about from an Australian perspective? And you're not going to get shovel ready. You're not going to get ready to actually put it out into the market, but you can get 90% of the way there in 5 minutes. I really think that you're going to see this kind of flattening of global talent, and it makes it much easier to work across borders than previously. And I think that's maybe the biggest, perhaps under-realized kind of impact of AI at the moment, is how much it will flatten the global talent.
Yeah, but the technology is one thing, skill is one thing, but having able to deliver an outcome and establish credibility is very different, right? So I think that's what the challenge would be. But I think, over the years, and especially if you are able to produce results, that credibility gap diminishes very fast.
Yeah, what it won't do is it can't make a mediocre engineer in the Philippines a good engineer in Australia. It can't do that. What it can do is make a really good engineer in the Philippines a good engineer in Australia by helping them learn the specific elements of the Australian market that they don't know. I mean, it's also a huge boon for people who are English as a second language, because if you're communicating with a client or an engineer over email or written, whatever, you can run it through AI and ask for advice and be like, this person said this from an Australian context. Help me understand some of the subtext that I might have missed. I've just had this email. It upsets me as a Filipino. Should I be upset? There's lots of things that you can use AI for that flatten those kind of cultural differences and communication barriers and technical barriers if it used properly. And the vast majority of people in every industry are still not using AI to its fullest extent. So I think what we're really going to see is not new tools changing the world. It's just the tools we already have being used more and better and more extensively in new ways.
Yes, but there is another dimension to this, that the speed, the expectation of something getting delivered, the speed, and what you can do. So I'm just giving an example, even for the audience. I did 10 of those at least. Taking a project to the board of the Asian Development Bank, typically you're a minister, you told this is what I want to do. We agreed, maybe it's a, I don't know, $300, $400, $500 million project. ADB or World Bank or anyone will go and hire a bunch of consultants, cost you maybe feasibility study $1 million or $2 million. The hiring process can take anywhere between 2 months to 6 months, depending on the processes. And you get them on board. By the time the feasibility finish, it's already 2 years. Then you go to board, it takes another 6 months or what. So by the time you mention that idea, it's only 2.5 years when a complete feasibility study is finished by a
Hmm.
project officer like myself to having a set of documents ready to take it to board. Right now, because I've done 10 of those, I can sit down and spend a week and get it ready.
Hmm.
Because I will, of course, in ADB sense or anywhere, get a team with an economist and engineers and everybody skill that I need. That's where the $1 million goes. But here, at a macro level, I know exactly what I expect from the engineers. So I
Hmm.
get the first draft from the AIs. Then I can have a real engineer saying, hey, just have a quick glimpse through this 5-pager that has already been done
Hmm.
for the engineering section.
Hmm.
But that document for the feasibility can be done in few weeks. So you
Hmm.
bring in an engineers from anywhere in Asia to go, and if I'm
Hmm.
sitting in Australia having done those, that becomes even more difficult, of course, to be able to match the culture and how the AI adoption has taken place. I don't know whether I've been able to formulate that question.
Yeah, I think so. And I think this kind of applies. I guess the way of thinking about it is what is an existing skill and what is a new skill. For example, someone who's been leading multi-million dollar projects in the Philippines, going to Australia, maybe they need to learn 20% new skills. And that
Yes.
20% new skills can be done a lot faster than it used to be. But certainly if someone hasn't done those sorts of things, then they're going to really struggle. I think AI does not create experts. It creates a jack of some trades. But if you're a jack of some trades and an expert in another, that's where it gets really useful. If it's just that 20, that sort of 80-20. So yeah, I think 100% there's lots of really complex, challenging roles that just require experience. And where a company like Spark Horizon plays a role is not necessarily supplying those people. It's more the middle of the pyramid. But by supplying people in the middle of the pyramid, it allows people to move up and learn those skills because it's the opportunity cost is those 10-year engineers, instead of doing their, I don't know, 100th best project in their career, can go and sit with the principal and learn some of the more soft skills or more complex skills around project origination or really difficult cutting edge killing challenges. So it's that, yeah, fattening the middle of the pyramid perhaps is the role, but not trying to. I think the activities you're talking about are absolutely the top of a kind of skill or experience pyramid.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to highlight one part and you address those because what happens when you are trying those high level, anybody can do it. Anybody confident enough. Just your client needs to be comfortable that you can do it because it's trust. Comfortable is the transaction, is no longer how many pieces of papers you've got with you, right? That's one. And second is that's the bit, so the scary part. Now that everybody can do it, that's the because of AI. I get now people say, I've done this concept paper, have a look. I say, wow, this is amazing. Then I say, hey, paragraph 38 says you are going to calculate. Can you explain? Sorry, it's yes, yeah. So I realized then it came from an AI. So that's the bit also challenging that people can claim. So that's where I think your company comes in a very nice way that if I'm going to get someone from Australia, say somebody working in a developing country who has done all of those, looking at those documents before you say, oh, wow, you could write that. Wow. But now that wow factor is gone because AI may have done it. So in the middle, you come in, you said, no, I actually certify. I worked with this guy. I think that's another big value that you bring to the table, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the new skills is people talk about is that AI is the biggest liar. It's the best lying tool that's ever been invented, as well as being the best learning tool that's ever been invented. And people often come at it with either one view or the other, and actually both are true. So one of the skills that any manager in any field or any leader in any field needs to have is one is using AI really well, and two is helping your team use AI really well and feeding AI processes into your work in a way that works. So, for example, if I would never want anyone in my team to put something in front of a client or anyone else that was AI generated that they could not understand and stand behind every single word in that document. I think it's just horrendous to put something out that you don't understand. It can help you put a document together that you do understand and is better written than you've done and learn a lot of new concepts. But you should never pump something out that you don't stand behind. And you see a lot of it. You see just AI, M dashes everywhere, and a lot of content that's just bland and mediocre. And so what expertise does is allows you to stand out from that bland AI generated mediocrity.
I think the point here that you make, and I fully agree, that AI is an amazing tool to learn. AI is an amazing tool where you know where you want to go. You have the skill, but few skills you're missing to supplement those sort of dips, gap in your knowledge. If there are certain dips, it helps you to do that which area I need to get an expert to have a look. But overall, it gives you that momentum, the speed. That I fully agree. But at the same time, I think it's time that we all put some of our thinking out there and put a timestamp on this. 10 years down there saying, oh, Jim, this is not you. You published that podcast where you already talked about it. Because I think that history, that authenticity, that credibility is very important suddenly. Before it was not. People will give a CV. So, wow. Right now, no one looks at your CV and said, okay, let me go to your LinkedIn profile and say, what did you post in 2007 if it was possible? Because that history is important, right? Because when I used to hire a lot of consultants, someone saying, I'm an energy efficiency specialist in Pacific. And I went through, wow, this is nice, very well written. And I said, I know this guy personally. He used to work for an oil company, and we fought publicly in one place where he said, these things are waste of time, energy efficiency. Now you are so passionate. So I went through and I wrote back him saying, when did you become an energy specialist? Energy efficiency is almost like a religion. You have to believe that there is value in saving. If you are a power generation person, you just say, hey, I just throw in extra megawatt. Why you want to do efficient light bulb to save a megawatt? It's almost like a religion. People who believe they will push and they understand. And after a while, he said, I just applied for this job, look cool. He said, no, I needed someone who is from that religion, because if you're going to convince a minister or somebody as senior, you need to be convinced yourself. So I think that's why publication, this might be more important going forward with AI, no? What do you think?
So there's probably a couple of points there, and I'll jump off. So I think one is, in a sea of AI generated slop, what is authentic, what is real, and finding proof points for I'm a real person with real expertise is quite difficult. And I completely agree. Anything that you can put out there that is obviously you and proves something is important. I think there's a really interesting point around the kind of people who've transitioned from oil and gas and fossil fuels into renewables. And obviously we need to work with people who have the skill set, but I think there is a political point here, which is that we have to move so fast to achieve what we need to achieve. And one of the reasons I do is we absolutely have to address climate change. We have to do it fast, because every fraction of a degree that we warm is going to make my kids' lives significantly worse, and my grandchildren's lives significantly worse. This is a battle, and it's a political battle, because we have to fight it from a kind of technology and a talent and everything else, but it's also something that's fought politically. And we have to be able to move at a pace that is quite extreme. And what you find is actually lots of people, again, you look at kind of people's history. For those who don't know, Australia had this massive political battle around a carbon tax, sort of 2015 era. And what I find interesting is I read histories of the climate tax and all of these people who absolutely destroyed the climate tax, working for fossil fuel giants, including the ex-CEO of my old company. And they're on record, like absolutely slagging climate change and things like that, and politically destroying real action. And now they work for an environmental consultancy or a green energy company. And whilst I'm happy for people to bring their skills and if they've had a change of heart, but I do question whether these folks actually are capable or willing to push as hard and as fast as we need to push to achieve what we need to. And I think probably not. I think a lot of these people, like the guy you were talking about, are coming over for convenience and a pay packet, not to achieve dramatic societal change as fast as we need to.
Yeah, I like that sort of labeling, that capability and willing versus convenience. This is very important, because we are talking about decarbonizing businesses, decarbonizing processes, but we have to decarbonizing society, political institutions. because it's all in the mindset. Either you see it or you don't. But coming back to the point, what I was trying to say, maybe it's very important now because of AI that people leave a marker behind, which get timestamped that 10 years back, I wrote something. Maybe a lot of engineers, especially the Asian engineers, don't value that writing something, saying I'm working for a company, very happy. But in this world of 100-year life, that book, that you may have to leave some publication, whether it's a YouTube video, that 10 years down the track, when you get challenged, you can still go back saying, look, at the pre-AI world, I already talked about these things. Because, I don't know, in 2 years down the track, maybe in 6 months down the track, it would be very hard to say, which is Jim real. So I think maybe you have any views on that people should start publication or writing and voice hard now?
I think people should just share their voice on what they think anyway. I think it's one of the most important things you can do. Like, people learn by talking and putting themselves out there. I read a really interesting article recently, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the author, but it talks about the 70% rule. So instead of, not the 80-20 rule, but it's this idea that you should be, when you've got an idea or a piece of written work or something, you should be putting it out into the world when you're at 70%. And it's not just so that you don't waste time, but it's actually this idea that imperfect ideas help you move forward and help move the society forward. So I've been trying to live by that a little bit recently, of just sharing a little bit more and talking a little bit more. But yeah, I think, and linking back to the AI sort of timestamp, I think there's some technology and social problems to solve with AI. If we're really 5 years down the track and AI video can generate an interview of me talking to you completely, which seems technically feasible, then you just can't function in a society that doesn't have a strong grip on reality. So we have to find ways to validate or confirm some sort of objective truth. And particularly the fight for climate change in a world where you've got all this fake news and fake stories and fake science and things like that. So it's not only from a personal perspective, is how do I make sure that people know who I am and what my statements are, but how do we move forward as a society with a view of actual science and fact? It's going to be it's hard today, right? With fake news and social media. It's going to be even harder in the future. And for those who haven't watched the movie yet, Mountainhead, it talks about this exact concept and is a very interesting, slightly clumsy, but it's a really good watch exactly on this topic.
I like the 70% rule. That's pretty good. That's very interesting because you put it out and then get your head around. But by the way, technology exists right now to do this video without you getting there. I know a few of the tools that can. So the point that I was trying to make many years ago, I think when I finished my MBA in 93 or whatnot, someone suggested that if you have a business idea, it was a practical thing, quite popular in Australia. I'm sure you know that. You write that idea on a piece of paper, mail it to yourself, go to Australia Post, get them stamped, both sides, even a gala seal, mail it to yourself, and you put it into the safe. Anyone uses it later on, you can say, look, because somebody actually said that it was in a practical way for simple ideas. So similarly, now, as you and I post this video, YouTube or wherever it goes, it will put a timestamp, right? It's recorded in 2025. So even if the AI generates comes on later, you can still say, hey, I was talking about that. So that's the point.
Yeah. And you see it on the internet today, is you can clearly, the internet that was the 2-year-old internet is significantly different than the internet today with content that's produced today. Like, the proportion of human generated versus AI generated is clearly different. You can see it in a lot of things that you read. And hopefully will still continue, is that people have a bit of a sense, an intuitive sense of what's AI and what's not. I think if AI keeps getting better and we can't tell the difference, then I don't know what the implications of that are, but we're heading into a period of significant change socially and technologically.
Yeah, I have a question for you and maybe for our listeners too, that old days that people will just take a photo and put a newspaper of today. So that is the example of what the date was, but that is gone. You can digitally generate anything. There must be some way of taking a photo and show and say, hey, that was posted on that day. I don't know.
Email is pretty good because obviously you can fake emails, but it's gone through servers and things like that. So there's a standard convention in business circles of sending your CYA, your cover your emails to yourself. I used to do it a lot when I did a lot of people management. And so you're having a difficult conversation with someone who's providing some performance feedback. You send an email to yourself and be like, this is the conversation that I just had. So that if 12 months down the line, you need to come back and revisit it, you can say, these were the words that I said and thought at the time. And that's quite a useful tool, is email yourself what happened.
I have a whole few gigabyte. When I left the bank, I got all those files transferred because any decision that was made, any project, so we have those records, yes. But I was thinking more like in a photo sense, video sense, that you can use to, you look at the photo saying, oh yeah, it was taken yesterday and this is real Jim, as opposed to...
There are technological solutions to this. And this is beyond my kind of remit as a tech person. But there's lots of things around algorithms and codes and prime numbers and all the kind of the fancy stuff that the Silicon Valley nerds come up with. But there are tools that say this was really generated by a camera generated on this date and things like that. So I think we just need more widespread use of those. I think the question is, are the people who and the companies that influence how we use the internet, do their incentives align with that? And we see the mass failures of social media companies to handle fake news. I don't think that they are. I think this is one where the technological solutions exist, that businesses that run the internet are not going to implement them on their own. So if we want those solutions, we have to politically implement rules and regulations around fake news. Yeah, Facebook wouldn't even clamp down on fake news in Myanmar, Burma, when it was causing a genocide. So you think they're going to solve these problems on their own? These are not companies that we should trust with objective reality, because they've shown over the last 5 to 10 years a complete failure.
Yeah, fake news is a sort of area that I don't know, but yes, it's scary indeed. But I was thinking more sort of engineering solutions, fake people appearing or somebody appearing, making a claim. So how do we avoid in your business situation? Now, okay, AI is a complex subject, but then put AI in the mind of a robot. That can solve a lot of problems, of course, create 1,000 or million new ones. So how does a capable robot change your or impact your business or similar thinking businesses?
Yeah, I think, so I've got a fairly strong view on this, and we're starting to see a bit of a decline in the hype bubble. So AI, obviously massive hype. I think it is really important. And we're starting to see that most serious commentators are recognizing that the large language models are very powerful, but they haven't solved many of the problems that we need to solve towards true robotics or true agent AI and things like that. It's like self-driving cars. The first 90% is hard, and every single percent afterwards gets harder and harder. So I think we're 5, 10, 15 years away from that sort of technology. I'm sure lots of people, lots of very serious commentators think it's going to move faster. Lots of serious commentators think it's going to move slower. I think we're going to see some very dramatic changes in some narrow fields around, especially large language models. But I think the application of those to more general use cases is going to be a lot slower than people thought. And this comes down to, I think The Economist wrote a big sort of feature piece on AI, which says that AI is not going to replace jobs. People using AI is going to replace jobs. And that this is a tool that's used by people rather than a thing that sits on its own, 2001 Space Odyssey running everything. So I think that's my view.
Artificial general intelligence, yes, that's far away. That I agree. But in terms of, and I like what the quotation that you make, that Economist said, that it's the people who will get rid of other people because the AI can do it. But that's where other challenges coming in. The digital divide of people using AI and people not using it, that will narrow tremendously, no? They create this sort of superhuman within the human, no?
But do we see that? And I think it could go either way. I think this is one of the big unsolved questions of the impact of AI. Is it going to flatten the divides? And that's my view, is that people in the Philippines and other developing economies can use AI and catch up with people in developing world, especially generationally. A young Filipino engineer really well versed in AI versus a more experienced Australian engineer who doesn't use AI, that gap drops. But on the other hand, are you going to see these tools become very expensive and lock developing world, people out of the use of them, in which case you could see the divide go and haves and have not kind of thing. I think part of this is none of these AI companies are making money. So until we actually see what business models they land on that will allow them to make money, we probably can't answer the question of, is it going to be increase the difference or flatten the difference? At the moment, I think it's going to flatten, but it could absolutely go the other way.
My take on this, obviously, where we started this conversation between North and South, that gets flattened for sure, because that gap goes. But then within the South, that gap grows. Within the North, that gap grows as well. People within the same family, someone using AI with the same educational background will flourish as opposed to who is not. So it's a very, very tricky situation right now. Those who will use AI as a tool until it becomes a sort of general intelligence. Those who are going to use move faster. And of course, that will narrow the gap between North and South. But within a community, someone will move very fast. Thank you for your time, Jim. Is there anything else, a point you want to make before we close off?
No, just I'm going to shamelessly plug my business. If you want to talk to me about some of these challenges, if you have hiring needs, if you want to build offshore teams or teams in the Philippines, I can support. It's my level of expertise. So yeah, a shameless plug for Spark Horizon, which is sparkhorizon.ph, or you can find and follow me on LinkedIn, where I talk a lot about these sorts of issues regularly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Jim. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Energypreneurs. If you enjoyed this, don't forget the full video is on YouTube. Just search Energypreneurs. Thank you. See you next time.